Hello, welcome to the Believe Show. Today we have with us Karen Warner-Schuler. Hi, Karen.
Hi, Senya. How are you?
I'm really glad you're on with us today. I'm going to tell you a few things about Karen and then we'll launch right into it. So first of all, the most important that you need to know is today is book launch day. This is a book Karen's been working on for a long time, and let me show it to you. I've gotten a copy. Get a copy for yourself, for a friend. It is The Sudden Caregiver. It's on Amazon. Today, as you can see, it's 99 cents. That's literally today. You get that so rarely with a friend. You may know that you can give this to a friend. You can email it to a friend. So The Sudden Caregiver, we're speaking about this book today. And I'm also going to pop into the link, thesuddencaregiver.com, which is Karen's website with lots and lots of resources. I've been there. There's so much information there. So you have both resources, and we'll tell you more about it in this book. And who is Karen? So I know Karen as an executive coach. I've known Karen for, I think, almost a decade from our positive psychology background. She's an awesome executive coach. I know that literally. People have told me that, people who she's coached. So I've known her for a really long time. And a few years ago, she went through this journey and started writing this book. So thank you so much for being here with us today.
You're welcome.
I want to start with the broad question and lead that into your discussion of the book. Karen, what is it that you believe to be true that others may not agree with you about?
I believe that most people would say that caregiving is a negative, terrible experience. And there's no absence of research that talks about that. The chance of mortality is 30% higher in caregivers than non-caregivers, that caregivers lose sleep, exercise poorly, eat poorly. 23% of caregivers have, this is not an advertisement for being a caregiver, by the way, but 23% of caregivers have an increased susceptibility to stroke, for example. On the work front, most of them are susceptible to losing their job. They have to cut back on their hours. They compromise their success at work if they're working outside the home. So when I became a caregiver and I thought, I'm just going to do the research and find the best practices, what I found was what I just said. And it's research, it's true, but it's not what I.
What is it? So on that canvas, given what the common beliefs are, what's your belief about caregiving?
My belief is I read those statistics and I was living it. So I'm here to say those things are all true. And you can do something about them. And so when I really was into the caregiving role, and when I began to speak to people about their lived experience of caregiving, they were other caregivers, we had a different experience. And when I was actually doing some research, I found this graphic, which is in my book, because it was this turning point for me, where they interviewed caregivers and they said, what are the significant factors of caregiving? And people talked about, it's exhausting. I'm never where I'm supposed to be at any given time. I do exercise poorly. I have too much on my plate. And caregivers rated those things. But they were also asked, are you closer to the person in your care? Are you able to provide what that person needs? Do you feel like you're doing a good job? And the answers there were so much more impactful and significant that literally you can look at that and see positive and negative, and the positive is up here and the negative is down here. And that was a moment where I thought all those well-being models that we studied in positive psychology were here. People had positive emotions to report, joyfulness, pride. You have a heightened sense of time going by when, in my case, I was living with someone who had been diagnosed with a terminal disease. And we were working, steadily, that's engagement, to reverse that. But you're also aware, I may have only a limited number of hours on the planet with this person who is my husband. How can I really appreciate that and be mindful? So all the things that we know about well-being, positive emotions, engagement, positive intimate relationships, meaning and accomplishment, those were all part of our experience. And as I interviewed people, one person, when it comes to meaning, she said, I took care of both of my aging parents. They died within 6 months of each other. I know they're looking down on me right now and saying, you did a good job. So that it's great to think about the caregiving through that lens of well-being rather than through the lens of it sucks, it's tough, it is. And that's what I call the caregiver paradox, by the way, which is, yes, it is all those negative things, and it is also these positive things.
Karen, I'm so glad you mentioned all that, because it almost makes me think at a meta level, and you're an executive coach, of just asking further. Here's what the research says, but if you ask a little further, there's other research, or there's more. You can see a bigger picture.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of that that impetus to ask comes from hearing something different from what you're reading. Mm-hmm. And there were a lot of good things that in the research that I read that helped me form what it ended up being my roadmap in my book. But I really felt like this is not reflecting my experience. So what is my experience, and how do I describe the experience of other caregivers?
Could you tell us, please, about how you came to this belief, and a little bit about your story, so people don't yet know how you became a sudden caregiver?
Oh, yeah, thank you. I was in Rome with my now late husband, and his name is Joel Kurtzman, and we were having a really great vacation. It was the first time that we had been really carefree. We were able to travel, work was all going well, the kids are launched, everything's fine. We had a great vacation in Rome, and we were sitting at Tre Scalia and having the tartuffe, which they're famous for. And I snapped a picture of my husband across from me because he looked so relaxed, and we had such a great day. We'd been to the Vatican, saw the Sistine Chapel that day. And in that picture, I look at that over and over again and say, I can't see the cancer, because 4 months later, he was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And overnight I became a sudden caregiver. Of course, I didn't think of it that way. It was just like, okay, he's in the hospital. We have to figure this out. Our daughter was getting married 2 weeks later from the time he was diagnosed. So we determined, she offered to cancel the wedding, but we said, no, the show must go on. This is because we felt like we're not going to go under the wheels of this thing. We're really going to be proactive and work toward it. And he lived for 18 months. And during that time, I was the primary person taking care of things. And we had help. There were family members who helped, and there were people in my family and friends who I don't know what I would have done without them. But for, at the end of the day, when you lock the door, the two people left are the caregiver and the care receiver.
So I've known you for a long time, and I think of you as a problem solver and a solution finder. So I'm imagining you then in that September and just thinking, I just picture you like going straight into action mode. What did you end up doing? I just see you as, we got to research this, we got to figure it out, we got to make everything that we can make work.
Yes. Well, I am a professional problem solver, and I am that person. Like now I say, until death, until a stage 4 diagnosis, I really felt like there was not a problem I had met that I couldn't solve. But I did all the things that were pragmatic to do. And actually in the book, in my roadmap, I have an acronym called PRISM, which is, what are the pragmatic things that have to happen here? We're in crisis. What do we have to do? What are the relationship things who needs to be, inner sanctum, who needs to be let known what's going on? There's a whole communication strategy that goes along with who you tell and who you don't tell. Integrative things like, will acupuncture help? Will diet and nutrition help? This is really the engagement part of that PERMA model, that well-being model, which is, what are the things that I'm not considering? The S in PRISM stands for social services, because eventually you have to admit there are people outside yourself that you can let into the family system who really are there to help and are trained to help and know how to help. And then the M is mindful. So what are the things that I need to do for myself so that I don't also get sick, and all of those things I said in the beginning of this conversation? How do I take care of myself? And for me, that meant proper nutrition, diet, and exercise. I always talk about it as it's everything your mom used to tell you, right? Go outside and play, eat your vegetables, get a good night's sleep. And the one that I really advocate, which I think we overlook a lot, and there's research, Roy Baumeister did some research on this, is that one of the hallmarks of caregiving on the negative side is depletion. So you're just spending yourself all day long, day after day. And there is research that says, take a mini break. And if you take a mini break, allow yourself that little pleasurable mini break, a little tiny bit every day, you can actually get back some of the energy that you're spending.
If people find themselves in this situation and they haven't yet picked up your book, what should they do? But before you answer, I just want to tell to the people who are with us today, please type in your questions to Karen. Karen is here for another just over 10 minutes, so please type in what questions you have. Also, let us know what takeaways you're starting to take from what we're saying here. So please type them in. We're here and available. What should people do?
I would tell you the first thing is, it's very practical. Get your paperwork in order. Because the last thing you want is to be worried about what's going to happen if the worst thing happens. But also, you should have done that already, and you know it by the time you become a caregiver. Like, we had not looked at our wills in 12 years. And so, number one, just organize that, find it. It's all over the house. Put it in one place. Number two, and this I think is quite important and so easy to do, is start a gratitude journal. So again, in positive psychology, Robert Emmons, we know that just taking a moment at the end of every day and noticing what was good about the day is really generative, and it helps you have a better day the next day. And I always advise, look at what was good that happened, a thing that was good that happened, but also who in your world did something extraordinary or simple that really made a difference. And you don't have to have a fancy journal from Barnes and Noble. You can just open your laptop and start typing. The third thing is, identify the things that you don't want to do or can't do. You're just overburdened, and find wonderful people in your village that will do that, that will join you. So for example, it's not that I'm bad at numbers. I always say I'm bad at numbers because I don't want to do them. But when you're a caregiver, there are insurance bills, there's all kinds of Medicare stuff. You're like balancing a lot of data. It's not my sweet spot. It's not my wheelhouse, but I have a friend, Richard, who is unbelievable at it, and he loves doing it. And so I would look at, if it came to a point where I needed someone to analyze this, I'm going to call on Richard. If it comes to a point where I'm not handy around the house and my husband was sick, so if we needed a railing installed, or the winter was the worst winter since 1872 in Boston when he got sick. I walked into the bathroom on the first floor and there was just water dripping down. So we have a wonderful guy in our world, in our community, named Nick. And he was my guy. Like, he would be the person that would help around the house when things started breaking or when something went wrong. So I call that forming your care leading squad. And the only thing you really have to know about that is nobody gets on that squad unless you trust them implicitly. It's not the time for like paying back someone who had you in their wedding, or it's really, they have to be more helpful than you can possibly do yourself. And then you let them in.
So get your paperwork in order, which, as you say, we all know we should be doing, but get your paperwork in order. Start a journal, whether it's even typing on the computer. Karen, do you ever look back? Did you at the time look back at those notes, or was it just to brain dump and get the good things out? What was the purpose for you?
I did it I've always been a journal person. So I wanted to note the good things. I wanted to reframe the day, especially bad days, and find those good things. But when I wrote my book, it's a wealth of information. It's a stack of, I started putting it on my laptop eventually, but it's a notebook to begin with. And a lot of the information informs my book. I took some of it out because it's so personal, but some of it is still in there.
Yeah. So get your paperwork in order, start a journal. What do you not want to do? I just think that's brilliant, because you have even more limited time. And like you said, implicit, trust. Let me ask a question that's coming, or a comment that's coming from the audience. Eileen is saying, yes, replenish throughout the day. She said her mom started exercising and walking regularly in her late 60s when Eileen's stepdad was sick. So got herself out of the house and caring for herself, just that kind of replenishment that you're speaking about.
That's perfect. I used to walk, I lived in Boston. My husband was being treated at Dana-Farber in Boston. So with that, we had a house there. And I would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning before the day started, and he would be still asleep, and go walk through my backyard with my dog. And I can tell you, it was, sometimes the snow is 3 feet deep, but I did it every day. And there's research also, Eileen, that being outside, seeing green and blue of outside is also replenishing, just to be in nature.
Mm-hmm. I want to tell people who are with us today that today, so correct me if this is wrong, but today the book, and I've dropped the book into the links, it's 99 cents, which happens once in a book's lifetime for an author. So is that accurate? That's happening today.
That is accurate. And I want to say something about Kindle, because I've gotten this question. You can read Kindle on your iPhone. You just need an app, or you can read it on an iPad. You don't need, so some people interpret that as, I have to have a Kindle, and I don't have a Kindle anymore. But no one has had a Kindle for a long time.
I read Kindle on my computer. I buy it on Kindle and read it on Kindle. Can you also talk about and this is kind of a two-part question, on getting the book for colleagues or friends, especially since today it's 99 cents. Can you speak a little about in what situation should I feel comfortable to give this gift to somebody?
I think if you know a caregiver, odds are they have the questions that this book answers. And you do have to be careful, because sometimes, I mean, it begins with me saying, my late husband. And if you're in a caregiving situation where you're not ready to feel like you might have the situation may resolve in the death of someone, it's probably, you might want to tread gently. Some people will know that though right away. And some people will say, that's exactly what I need. I need to see what her experience was and what are some of the things that we can do.
Yeah, I was also thinking, as I've been reading the book since it came out, I was thinking, is this the kind of thing that's best if I'm gifting it to someone I care about? For someone who finds themselves, like you said, in a completely unexpected, like cancer, poof, and it hits you, or even an aging parent, which is somewhat more gradual or over years. And I'm really asking you because I'm thinking, for whom is this valuable?
Well, it's interesting, because when I first named this the sudden caregiver, I thought, well, there's sudden caregiving and then there's long-term caregiving. But watching my sister with my mom, who just passed away, as you know, I could tell, and my sister was her primary caregiver, there were sudden emergencies constantly throughout. So in the book, there's a map that spells the acronym CARE. Crisis, you go from crisis as normal as possible, where you're stabilized, resolution of some sort. It could be remission. It could be, in my case, I lost my husband, and then evolution out of the caregiving role. But even if you're in as normal as possible, which is the most stable phase, there's always the, we've got to go to the ER. She has an infection. She has pneumonia. And my husband and I, even in the most as normal as possible phase, would find ourselves driving to the emergency room. It just is part of any illness or any aging. So I actually think it's relevant for all caregivers.
For all of that. Karen, you have told me, and I'm also seeing it as I'm going through the book, that there are different parts of the book for different stages, including, for example, what do you do even if the loved one passes away? Could you walk us through a little bit of that, just so people have kind of a bird's eye view?
Yes, thank you. So the very beginning is just the numbers of 53 million caregivers in the US alone, 11% of.
It's huge. It's huge. And just to build on that, but didn't you tell me the end of this week is National Caregiving Day?
Yes. Yeah. And so there are a lot of caregivers in the world, to say. And so what do we do when, I'm losing my train of thought, I'm really sorry.
No, it's because I'm asking you on three different, I had said, what's the structure of the book?
Okay, thank you. So the first thing I start with is, how do you be a caregiver? Which is just laying a foundation of resilience and well-being, tapping into intentionally building a practice of well-being, which you do have to intend to do mindfully. The second part is how to do caregiving. So what are the things that you do? That's the the care map I talked about and the prism. What are the pragmatic checklist of things that you should run through? The last part is eventually you move away from the caregiving role, either because the person gets well and doesn't quite need that engagement, that level of caregiving, or as in my case, I went through a period of grieving and just trying to figure out what is life on the other side of this experience. But caregiving changes you profoundly. And it's important in that phase, that last part of my book, we talk about the lessons of caregiving. How do you integrate those lessons so that you become greater than the sum of its parts, that you really understand how profoundly you were changed? And that's something the caregivers I spoke with report, that they can look back on their journey and say, I'm a different person. And I'm really surprised that I was able to do what I did.
Mm-hmm. As you look back on the caregiving time, what's a thought that consistently stays with you?
You know, when my husband we were talking to the rabbi who was going to preside over his memorial service, and his name is Rabbi Darby, and he's an amazing man. And he said, what is something that you're proud of about this experience? And without hesitation, I can say, I did not shirk. I was not my usual selfish, petty, I don't want to do this. I feel like going here, but like I've got to give up my business. I never shirked. It was just, what do I have to do and how do I have to do it? And that experience helps me. It informs everything I do going forward. That idea that I'm good for it. And there was another piece of it, which is the only way out is through. There's no shortcut to what was on that journey. I had to take that journey every single step of the way. So appreciate the gifts it brought me at the end.
In that time from when you discovered it, those full 18 months, you were completely all in. This book is now a reflection of everything that's happened, but you're just saying, yeah. I was there. I was.
And there's, Joe Casper, who is in our community, the MAP community. And he was in my class. He's a medical doctor. He lost his son when his son was 19 years old to a rare form of epilepsy. And he created something called Codestiny. And when I started writing my book, I heard Joe speak at one of our MAP summit meetings. And what he talked about was this idea of Codestiny, the idea that if you're mourning and you're grieving, embrace some part of that person's legacy who isn't here to carry it on. So my husband wrote 20 business books. He was the big guy in the world. He had a big footprint. And I'm not him. I'm not going to write the next great business book. But I felt like in his honor, our Codestiny can be, let's change the caregiver story. Let's make it a better story than negativity and depletion. It can be so much more.
Yeah. That's so poignant. It's so meaningful. You describe it so visually in the book too, because you say, I know exactly where Joel has sat in which armchair and how he propped his laptop open. And here I was doing the Joel thing, but about the situation.
I'm shocked to be able to hold a book in my hand that I actually wrote. It's just astonishing to me, even today when it goes on sale. So
before we get to the ending two questions, tell me one good thing that's happened in the book writing journey. So actually not even the caregiving, but the book writing, just to switch gears a little bit.
I think the most amazing thing has been the village. I keep using that word, but the community that came together around me. Because when I started writing this, I was really a sad little widow sitting at my kitchen counter, my dog at my feet, my husband was dead. I lived in a town I decided to move to where I didn't know anyone except my sister. And I immediately joined a workshop, the Theano workshop. And I was among other writers who were high quality writers whose opinions really mattered to me. And then I just kept at that I just kept joining and staying at that. And then the people in the community of University of Pennsylvania who are just so giving and so loving. And if they knew I needed something, they were there for me. I applied for a grant and got from the Alumni Association. And that was the first time I thought, darn, people are really going to ask me if I actually wrote this book. So I have to write it. Like, even though it was that like thought about question mark in my head. And I'll fast forward to last week when, as I had shared with you, my mom passed away from COVID, and she was 87. And my book launch was this week. And I have been working for 4 years to get my book together. We did not know the timing of the COVID was quite unexpected. And so I couldn't do all those little things I needed to do. And I reached out to someone in the community, a number of people, and someone called me and he said, you need your village and you need to ask them to help you now because you can't. Mm-hmm. And I'm the person, I'm the problem solver. I'm not the person who asks for help. And I just said, I don't know how I can do that. But the more I talked to him, he was so loving and so kind. And he just said, no, I'm telling you, if you ask people, they'll help you. And it's amazing to me that is exactly. So I was able to take the time I needed to be with my family, to write my mother's eulogy, to really honor her passing and her life and celebrate that, knowing that the village had me and, signing on every day and seeing someone posting something on Facebook or LinkedIn, including you, Senya. So it's just been that part of the writing experience has been the most amazing.
It just feels like you allowed people to help.
When I'm back to my care leading squad, so they're trustworthy. They're good for it. You're not going to know. Oh no, put it. Yeah.
Right.
Helping her. So.
Right. So it sounds like two things actually, that you just kept chipping away at it in terms of the book, and also that at different stages you kept checking in. Oh, this group wants me to work more. This group wants to hear from me more. This group wants to put the word out that, like, for example, I'll put it up again today. It's 99 cents on Kindle, but people are saying, hey, Karen, we want to see this. We want to do this. We want you to do this.
Yes. And many people said many times, the world needs this book. So, but I will emphasize the thing that is the big thing for me is all those people that were so utterly reliable, that there was someone who helped me get it from a Word document into a book. An actual book, and then is helping with the launch today on Amazon. She calls herself a book shepherd. And there were just people that, my editor, my designer, people that I gave them the problem and said I'm struggling, and they just took it. And in my playbook, which is online, I think I
love the playbook. I want to shout out to the playbook. So once you have the book, could you hold up the book? Because I have a Kindle version. So when I hold up my book, it looks like this book, exactly. So I'm really glad you're holding it up. Once you start the book, my book is the e-version. Once you start the book, it's go to this and get this playbook. So I've done that. I've gotten the playbook, really, really concise information.
Yeah, and the playbook allows you to apply for your own caregiving situation the advice in the book, because
once you read the content in the book, absolutely.
Yeah. And I will say, because this keeps coming in my mind, the paperback is coming out this week on National Caregiver Day.
Now that is the 19th, right?
Yes.
Okay,
and
great.
Could I say something about National Caregiver Day?
Yes, I think people would love to know, yes.
Yes. So National Caregivers Day it's been proposed, there's a bill before Congress to make it an official national day, like Mother's Day. And one of the things that you need to do, or I hope you will do, if you take nothing else away, is imagine the life of the caregiver in your midst and really reach out to someone. So there are the family caregivers. There's someone in your world who's taking care of some family member. Do something nice for them. Don't say, hey, can I help you? Just whatever you're good at, do it. I had someone who's kept saying, can I bring you dinner? Can I bring you dinner? During this, 18-month period. And toward the end, she just called me and said, I don't care where you are in the house, just leave your door unlocked. I'm coming to fill your freezer. And she called herself the food fairy. And that's what she and her husband did. Every week there was great food they're professional cooks, so I was very, very lucky. But things like that. Or one day I came home from a really difficult day, you know, just a bad commute home from the hospital, a full day of tests, and the house is dark, it's cold, and I opened my front door and there was a little package on my front door. And every week for 4 weeks, one of my friends thought to give me something, and they all came up with different things because they all knew me at different times in my life. But one was just, here's some knitting to do, because I'm a really terrible knitter, but I like to pass time that way. I never finish anything. So one was a little box of candy, one was flowers. So everybody, they just thought of it and just made it happen and didn't ask me what they could do. The other thing about caregivers are, if you're in the medical profession, think about the people that come in with your patients. They're the caregivers. And almost never do people say, hey, how are you doing? But when people would ask me how I was doing, when I would accompany to all these, it would bring tears to my eyes, because it's just all, and my answer would be, I'm good, I'm fine. But I felt seen, which is, of course, the greatest human need that we can have. And then if you know a frontline worker, these are all forms of caregiving, not just the family caregiver. Frontline workers have had the most horrendous year you can possibly imagine. And they have been doing things that shield us from those realities that this last year has had. So we have a friend who's a frontline worker, and when she was absolutely in it, had to change her clothes in the vestibule before she went in and out of the house, only had one mask. So she had to completely wash it and make sure, and every day went back in. And we were talking to her mom, and she said, they need things, they need food that they can slip in their pocket. So they don't have time to take lunch, they don't have time to eat. So we sent a whole bunch of kind bars, and try to do it for everybody, even, for the person you're sending it to share. And then the last thing is, don't overlook the people that make our homes, that care for our homes and the people in our homes, so that we can do what we do. I think of my daughter, who is working from home. She has 2 little ones. She has a woman named Monica who comes in and makes her world possible, makes her ability to go up to her bedroom, close the office, the bedroom door, and do her job. And those people are often, not that we take them for granted, because they're part of our lives and our families, but sometimes I can tell you, the people in my life like that, I do not compensate them enough, and I do not thank them enough. So it's National Caregivers Day. Thank a caregiver.
So it sounds like across the board, your family, healthcare workers, the people that you meet in the hospital, people who take care of your home and make your life better. So just thank the people who you're observing their work.
Absolutely. Yeah. They're in your world. They're making your world work. So
impossible. Thank you. Our last 2 questions. For the people who have been with us today, what is a thought you would like to leave everybody with?
I think the most important thing is the Rosalind Carter, our former First Lady, her quote, which is, there are only 4 kinds of people in the world: those who have been caregivers, those who are caregivers, those who will need caregivers, and those who will be caregivers. And every one of us is one of those. And if it's not today, it's in your future. So prepare for it the way you would any life event. It's really, it's coming.
Yeah. Yeah, if it's not here, it's coming. What did you tell me just before the show? Out of the 12 people around you, 2 are active caregivers, something like that?
Just do the math. At least 2 are actively caregiving for someone. Or a lot of times people are in a caregiving group. Like, my sister was primary caregiver for my mom, but we were go-to people. I don't live physically nearby, but when something was needed, I was available. And all of my sisters were, I have 4 sisters, we all did that. Odds are you're one of those people also.
And the last question, if you could snap your fingers and almost everyone in the world were to take some action, what action would you want them to take?
I think I would say always be kinder than you feel, because everyone is going through something. And when I say always be kinder than you feel, I actually mean that literally. That there were days when I would just think, well, my caregiving situation is much worse than your caregiving situation. And to find a way to say, I can be kind here. I do what, and do it and behave that way.
Karen, thank you so very much. I'm going to put up the links one more time before we end, but thank you so, so very much for sharing this information with us today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for asking me. I'm